The generator went out at 11:43. You know the exact time because you looked at your watch when the lights died. The specific reflex of someone who has lived on this farm for 22 years and knows that when the power goes, the clock in the kitchen resets, and you will spend the next morning trying to remember what time it actually was. 11:43. You were in the barn finishing the last of the evening work, the kind of task that should have taken 20 minutes and took 2 hours because the tractor coupling had jammed again and you were not going back to the house until it was fixed. The lights went out and you stood in the complete dark of the barn and you waited for your eyes to adjust, and they did not adjust because there was nothing to adjust to. No moon, no stars visible through the gaps in the roof planking. The kind of dark that has physical weight. You found your phone in your pocket, the flashlight app. The beam of it cut through the barn dust and caught the eyes of the cattle in their stalls, and they were not behaving normally. You have had cattle for 16 years. You know what normal looks like at 11:43 at night when a flashlight wakes them. They shift. They make sounds. They are briefly annoyed, and then they settle. They were not settling. They were pressed against the far side of their stalls. All of them. Simultaneously. The specific posture of prey animals that have detected something and have nowhere to go. You have seen this posture exactly once before, 3 years ago, when a coyote got into the barn. The cattle pressed against the far wall and made no sound at all. They were making no sound at all. You turned off your phone flashlight. Not a decision exactly. More like an instinct. Something that told you that light in a dark barn is visible from outside a dark barn and that visible was not what you wanted to be right now. You stood in the complete dark and you listened. The farm at night has sounds. The specific repertoire of a working Midwest property. The creak of the barn structure settling in the cold, the occasional movement of cattle in their stalls, the distant sound of the highway 2 miles east that never fully goes away, the wind through the corn that is planted to the north and west and which produces a particular soft percussion that you have heard every night for 22 years and stopped consciously registering years ago. The highway sound was gone, not faded, not reduced by weather or wind direction. Gone. The highway that carries trucks 24 hours a day and has done so for as long as you have lived on this property was producing no sound at all. You have never heard the highway go silent. Not once. Not in 22 years. You moved to the barn door. Not the main door. The main door faces the house and the driveway and whatever is between you and the house. The side door, the one that opens onto the equipment yard and the back field. The one you use when you are moving between the barn and the grain storage. You got to it and you put your hand on the latch and you stopped. There was a sound outside. Not the highway, not wind, not any of the cataloged sounds of the farm at night. A sound you had no category for. Multiple sources. Irregular rhythm. The specific quality of movement that has no coordination, no purpose, no destination. Something between shuffling and dragging, distributed across what sounded like a large area, coming from the direction of the driveway. You took your hand off the latch. You moved to the gap between 2 wall planks on the north side of the barn. The one you have been meaning to fix for 3 years and have never fixed. The one that lets in a thin line of outside air and, in daylight, a thin line of outside light. You put your eye to it. It took you a long time to understand what you were seeing. The yard light at the end of the driveway was still on. It runs on a separate circuit from the house and barn, and in its light you could see the driveway and the area in front of the house. And in that area there were shapes, moving shapes. 7 or 8 of them that you could see, possibly more at the edges of the light. That they were not moving the way people move. You have seen people move in every condition. Drunk, injured, exhausted, sick. The movement of the shapes in your driveway did not match any of those categories. It was wrong in a way that was difficult to name. Wrong in the joints. Wrong in the relationship between intention and motion. Moving with the specific wrongness of something that is no longer fully operating the thing that it is using to move. One of them was wearing what looked like a county sheriff's uniform. You did not look anymore. You moved back from the gap, and you sat down on the barn floor with your back against the wall, and you thought very carefully about what you had and what you did not have. What you had, your phone, 37% battery. A pitchfork hanging on the wall beside the cattle stalls. A length of chain on the workbench that you use to secure the tractor. The tractor itself, which is not currently running because the coupling is jammed. 2 baling hooks on the south wall. A partial bag of grain. water in the cattle troughs, no food for yourself, no other weapon, no radio, the barn itself, wooden walls, wooden doors, wooden floor, a structure designed to keep weather out and cattle in, not designed for anything else. What you did not have: a working vehicle, a clear path to the house, any certainty about how many of them were outside, any certainty about whether the house was still secure, any certainty about whether anyone was coming. You picked up the pitchfork. The cattle had settled into a low, continuous sound, not their normal sounds, something underneath their normal sounds, a frequency you had not heard from them before in 16 years. You stayed low, you moved to the main door, the one that faces the house, and you put your ear against the wood. Footsteps on gravel, irregular, close. On the driveway side of the barn, moving along the wall. You backed away from the door. Something hit the wall. Not hard, not the sound of intention, the sound of something that has walked into an obstacle and is now pressing against it. The specific percussion of weight against wood with no particular purpose behind it. Then it moved along the wall. Then it stopped. Then it hit the wall again. In the same place. You moved to the center of the barn, away from the walls, away from the gaps. You held the pitchfork and you stood in the complete dark and you listened to the thing outside press against the wood of your barn with the specific rhythm of something that is not going anywhere. Your phone was at 37%. You had not called anyone. The thought arrived and you examined it. You had been in the barn for 40 minutes since the lights went out, and it had not occurred to you to call anyone because there was no one to call. Not because you did not have numbers, because somewhere in the last 40 minutes you had arrived at the understanding that the people you would call were also inside buildings they were not leaving, or they were the shapes in your driveway, or they were somewhere on the highway that had gone silent. You did not call anyone. Outside, more sounds. Not just the one against the wall. Multiple sets of feet on gravel, crossing the yard, moving in the specific directionless way you had seen from the gap. No coordination, no destination, just movement. One of them hit the main door. Not a knock, not a pound. Just the weight of something walking into a door and pressing against it. The door flexing slightly inward, the latch holding, then the weight again. Then again, the same place, the same rhythm. The sound of something that has found an obstacle and keeps finding it. The cattle made a sound you had never heard them make. You gripped the pitchfork with both hands and you stood in the center of your barn in the complete dark of an Iowa November night, and you listened to the door flex and the cattle cry and the sounds multiply outside, and you thought about the tractor coupling that had taken 2 hours to fix and whether it would have mattered if you had gone back to the house when you planned to. It would not have mattered. Whatever was in your driveway had been in your driveway before you noticed it. The cattle had known before you knew. The highway had gone silent before you turned off your flashlight. Whatever this was had arrived before you were paying attention to it, which means that the 2 hours you spent on the tractor coupling were not the variable. You breathed. You were in a barn with cattle and a pitchfork and 37% battery and wooden walls. You had been in worse situations. You had never been in a situation like this, but you had been in worse situations in the sense that you had been in situations where the outcome was unclear and you had made decisions and the decisions had been correct and you were still here. You were still here. Outside, the sound continued, the door flexed, the cattle cried, the Iowa dark pressed in from every direction, and the shapes moved through your yard with their specific wrong movement and their specific wrong rhythm. You held the pitchfork, you waited. The battery was at 37% and the night was very long and you were very alone. And you waited.